You are invited to a murder. Arlington Grange, home of wealthy widow Elizabeth Peacock, society hostess and patron of the arts, a woman with a reputation she would rather forget. Colonel Mustard, secret lover of Mrs. Peacock, a dashing military hero whose glittering career hides a tarnished past. The Reverend Green, pastor of the parish, whose means of raising money are not heaven-sent. Though a man of the cloth, he has feet of clay. Professor Plum, nuclear physicist and government advisor. But would his research methods stand the scrutiny of a microscope? Miss Scarlet, vivacious stepdaughter of Mrs. Peacock, whose lust for the high life will let nothing or no one stand in her way. And Mrs. White, for the past 15 years, friend and housekeeper to Mrs. Peacock. But what dark secrets did she bring to Arlington Grange? 6 people, all with murder on their minds.
Good evening and welcome to a special Christmas Cluedo, where for the next 45 minutes we invite you to sit back and play armchair detective to solve the mystery of the murder at Arlington Grange. Who committed the callous crime, what weapon did they use, and in which room at the Grange did the dreadful deed take place? Well, Cluedo, like all good detective work, is about deduction and elimination, and that's the task ahead of our sleuths in studio tonight. And first, someone I'm sure is no stranger to a spot of sleuthing, Detective Sergeant Roach from the Bill, Tony Scannell. Joining him on her day off from Wentworth Detention Centre, Fiona Spence. And against them this evening to make sure of some gentle rivalry, also from the Bill, WPC Ackland, but in plain clothes, of course, Trudy Goodwin. And her partner in crime tonight with Trudy, a man who was Danny Kane, is used to dodging the long arm of the law, from the Paradise Club, Leslie Grantham, our detective. Now, in tonight's murder mystery, our investigations indicate that one of these 6 weapons was used to commit the crime. Was it this knife? Or the candlestick? Maybe it was the rope. The lead piping? The spanner? Or was it this gun? And that's not all our detectives had to discover. In which room at Arlington Grange did the murder take place? Was it in the drawing room, the dining room, the hall, the kitchen, the library, or was it in the study? Now, consider the evidence. It's Christmas Day at Arlington Grange, and the lady of the manor, Mrs. Peacock, has invited a few close friends to share the traditional turkey dinner.
Happy Christmas.
Thank you. Won't you come in?
Thank you.
You'll find the kitchen along there.
Thank you, Mum.
And if you'd like to come this way.
Oh, wonderful.
This is my stepdaughter, Vivian Scarlett. Vivian, this is Richard Forrest. At least, I assume.
Yes. Yes, I'm terribly sorry. I just thought it might be rather...
Very festive, yes.
Of course. I used to work for his father.
The judge?
Yes. So I only remember Master Richard, well, Mr. Richard as he is now, when he was, about 10 or 11. Then Mrs. Forrest died, and Master Richard got packed off to boarding school, and the judge sold this place. And I got sold along with it, as you might say. And have you worked for Master Richard for long? Mr. Richard? Mr. Richard.
Quite a while, yeah.
So you'd know if all the stories were true then? Oh, not that I'm asking you to betray any confidences.
Oh, he's led quite a life. It's worn me out sometimes just watching.
Really?
But I think he's changed. The last couple of years, And then his father died.
Oh, yes.
I get the impression he's ready to settle down.
Happy Christmas, my dear.
Happy Christmas, Professor. Mother's in the drawing room.
Oh, right.
Though she has someone with her.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, anyway, I'll,
Yes, you go in.
Vivian?
Wasn't that the desperate suitor I just saw?
Well, at least he didn't come with flowers this time. There was another bunch delivered yesterday.
Has your mother said anything?
I'm still supposed to know nothing about it. I said to her, all these flowers from Professor Plum, I think he must fancy you. She said, oh, Vivian, don't be ridiculous.
Well, he's still trying, so she can't have said no.
I think it's just a boost to her ego. She can't have that many admirers. Not at her age.
You're a cruel, cruel woman.
Don't you like her?
Happy Christmas!
Oh, happy Christmas, Reverend. This is Ken. Ken, this is Reverend Green.
How do you do, Reverend? I sneaked in the back way because I wanted to bring you some of these mince pies. My housekeeper always does far too many.
Oh, don't worry, we can dispose of them for you.
Well, you're joining us for Christmas, are you, Ken?
Well, my boss is.
Oh.
Yes, Ken's Mr. Forrest's chauffeur. There, I'm getting used to it now, aren't I? Mr. Forrest. You remember the judge's son? The judge who used to live here?
Yes.
Rang Mrs. Peacock yesterday, right out of the blue. So it's can I cope with 2 more mouths to feed? No question of whether I'd like a little bit of extra help.
He's never mentioned me, has he, your Mr. Forrest?
As I remember.
No. Well, I just wondered. How are we getting through this?
Library.
Yes. Yes, I've always dreamt of coming back here. You know how wherever you go, you always keep this image of home in your head? Well, this was it for me.
That's your father told you about me, did he?
You once appeared before him on a manslaughter charge.
Oh, you did talk about me. Well, I'm flattered.
But he didn't really talk about you, no. You see, my father, well, he kept very extensive diaries, giving his candid opinion on some of the more colourful miscarriages of justice he'd been forced to preside over. You know, people being found not guilty when he was certain in his own mind they were as guilty as sin.
So you know all about me?
Yes, all about 1 or 2 other people as well.
He said he was in the neighbourhood and could he call, which gave me very little choice but to invite him to join us for dinner.
I gather he spent most of his time squandering the family fortune.
And his father was a judge, you say?
Yes. I believe.
I met him when I bought the house.
Well, I never... Well, I might as well admit it. I appeared before him once. We'd been collecting money to equip the church with new bells, and some of it disappeared. It was a dreadful affair. Dreadful.
Well, the son won't know that, will he?
Couldn't possibly.
I'm sure we all have our little secrets. Just that you're the only one professionally bound to confess them.
Study.
Yes. This is where I used to be summoned for my weekly tellings off.
He was my uncle, by the way. I shot him. Did these diaries tell you that?
You know, he was your guardian, wasn't he?
Yes, only the older I got, the closer he wanted to guard me. So one day I picked up a gun, just to threaten him, make him take his greasy hands off me. Only it was loaded, and so...
Excuse me. Only your mother says if you don't come now, your turkey's going to get cold.
Now, let me see what I've got here. Mrs. Peacock.
Well, thank you.
And Professor Plum. I say.
Okay.
And Miss Scarlet.
Oh, goody, I love presents.
Does somebody want something?
No, you've got to get your present.
Oh dear, you want to be careful of that.
And Colonel Mustard.
Sure.
And Mrs. White.
Well, what a surprise. I wasn't expecting anything.
Oh, look, I've got a gun. I wonder if it's loaded.
pickle stick.
What is this little charade all about? This is supposed to tell me something, is it?
Just presents from Father Christmas.
If you won't have the guts to say it, then I will. My wife was killed in a car accident. I say accident because that's precisely what it was. So if you're about to insinuate it was something else, then say it!
Ho, ho, ho.
Man's an idiot. But what about the rest of you? Anybody else wonder just what these presents are for?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Well, I assume this is a bell rope. But I think I've already explained, so why? Why now?
Well, I like my present. I think it might come in useful.
I seem to have got a piece of lead. Doesn't mean a thing.
And you, Elizabeth. That's rather a lethal-looking weapon.
Yes, isn't it? I wonder if I can still... Some things one never forgets. Well, since dinner seems to be over, I think it's time we had a few games. Yes?
Well, how can I not take it seriously? How can anybody else not take it seriously when he keeps giving us these things to remind us of events we'd rather not be reminded of?
He's a joker, a games player. I've seen him pull all sorts of stunts. Any kind of game, practical joke, he can't resist it.
Ah.
Upsetting the Reverend as well he was.
No, we're not going to talk any more about all that. Mrs. Peacock's orders. No, we're going to do a quiz.
I'm not doing no quiz.
No, everybody, she was adamant. Now, what you have to do is you all have a notebook and a pencil. Then you go around the downstairs rooms in the house and you find 2 questions in each. Now, they're all about Christmas. You just have to write down the answers.
So that'll be one of them, will it?
Oh my, how did that get there?
Name all Santa's reindeer.
I didn't know they had names.
I see. And you say these diaries contain the full story of Velma and her knife-throwing act.
And the unfortunate death of the rival for her lover's affection.
That was an accident. The stupid girl moved.
So the jury decided, yes. A jury of men. Men who turned visibly weak at the knees on seeing the beautiful and provocatively dressed Velma entering the witness box. I quote.
From your father's diaries.
Yes. He does go on to say what he thought the verdict should have been.
Sounds exciting reading.
Yes, well, I am told by more than one publisher that they might offer me a great deal of money. And do you know what I'd like to do with that money?
No.
Buy back the ancestral hall.
Pity it's not for sale.
Yes, isn't it? Especially since if it were, I might be able to arrange to have the diaries edited so as to say, leave out all mention of poor Velma and her most unfortunate accident.
That's blackmail, Mr. Forrest.
Up there.
Oh! In which year could you have been fined 5 shillings for celebrating Christmas?
1659.
Yes. I'm not entirely stupid, thank you.
Other ones here. Name the 3 kings. Want me to tell you?
I think I'll come back when it's quieter.
I don't care what you have to do. I can't face all that being brought out into the open again. Not again. Not after all this time.
And in return?
I've said.
Well, I think I've got all the answers I wanted. How are you doing?
Brilliantly.
Good. So am I.
The questions are over the fireplace.
I'd rather ask you one. You're not really going to accept that miserable offer of marriage from that miserable man, are you?
I didn't think you knew.
This is a tricky one.
Oh, yeah.
How old is Rudolph?
What?
I think they mean how old's the song.
Ah, good. So, how are we doing?
Oh, coming along nicely, sir. Now, I've done the drawing room, so...
Right, well, I think I'll just try the, study. Excuse me.
You louse!
Vivian?
Don't you Vivian me. Don't you come near me or touch me again. You lying, betraying. I'll see you in hell.
Have you seen Mrs. Peacock?
Drawing room. The present he gave me. I do know why. But I didn't want to say anything in front of the others. It was a thesis I did. Got me my job, really. On lead and nuclear fission. Lead, you see. That's why it was a piece of lead piping.
Yes, well, I'm sure that's all very interesting.
And then I was accused, falsely accused, of having stolen the idea from one of my students. I wanted you to know, because I didn't want there to be anything that might come between us.
Professor Plum, you don't have to confide in me. It was very nice of you to ask, but I'm not going to marry you.
I hoped you'd gone. Why did you have to do it, raking everything up? Just tell me. Why?
Yes, and you can tell me too.
We don't want to know about the past. All that was finished. At least until you came.
And now, for some of us, it's the future that's finished as well. The future we might have had before you started interfering.
Well, and what have you got to say for yourself?
Ho, ho, ho.
Not laughing now, Santa. Balthazar, Melchior, Caspar.
Oh. What was the Roman equivalent of Christmas?
Saturnalia.
Amazing.
So I've won then, have I?
What on earth?
He's dead!
Forrest?
No!
Not Mr. Forrest. Then who?
His chauffeur! Ken! Ken's lying on the floor! And he's dead!
So, Ken, the chauffeur, is dead. And our initial inquiries have led us to identify these 6 murder suspects. Was it the hostess, Mrs. Peacock? Her stepdaughter, Miss Scarlett? Her housekeeper, Mrs. White? Perhaps it was Professor Plum, or his rival in love, Colonel Mustard, not forgetting, of course, the Reverend Green. We've all seen the evidence of what happened that eventful evening at Arlington Grange, but to our sleuths, what I want to know is just a sort of gut reaction. Who did it, with what weapon, and in which room, just on the evidence you've seen so far?
Well, our gut reaction was that it was Colonel Mustard. In the dining room with
a spanner.
Trudy and Leslie.
Our gut reaction is that it is Colonel Mustard with the candelabra.
That's preposterous.
In the kitchen.
Well, I wonder, do you at home agree? And will our sleuths stick to their deductions when they start cross-examining the suspects? Join us in a couple of moments after the break when our detectives will have a chance to grill the guests who are at the Grange and come one step nearer, perhaps, to solving that crime. Welcome back to Christmas Cluedo. And now our studio sleuths get the chance to interrogate the suspects. However, in this interview session, each suspect only has to answer one question. So once one of the teams has questioned a suspect, that suspect can't be asked any further questions until the next round of our investigations. Okay, is that clear? Now, to decide who goes first, Tony and Fiona. In the drawing room, what colour was the lampshade on the drinks table?
Pink. Oh, I've made a mistake. Blue. Oh.
Trudy and Leslie.
Blue.
You were right.
You were right, yes.
You have a chance then to interrogate one of the suspects. But before you start, I have to say one more thing. 5 of these suspects have to tell the truth. Only the murderer can lie.
Right, I would like to ask Colonel Mustard a question, please. I'd like to know where you were going when Mr. Forrest and Mrs. Peacock were talking in the drawing room. You passed by in the background. Where
Yes,
were you?
I believe I did. I was doing the quiz. I couldn't hear a word they were talking about.
Tony and Fiona.
I'd like to ask Professor Plum. He was accused of plagiarising one of his students' work. Was that student Richard Forrest?
No, the student was a young lady. It was all dealt with quite happily within the college, and she, in fact, was sent down for possessing illegal substances.
I gather it's quite common, too, in the academic world. Trudy and Leslie, to another suspect, please.
I'd like to ask Mrs. White a question. What was the significance of the candlestick present?
Well, I had worked for a family before I went to work for the judge, and they had a terrible fire, and when it was all over, they all got together and accused me of starting it.
Tony and Fiona have 3 suspects left here.
Mrs. Peacock, when you were talking to Colonel Mustard and saying to him, I don't care what you do, I just don't want all this dragged up, what were you asking him to do?
I was going to leave that entirely to Mike. I trust him implicitly as to how he would deal with it.
Trudy and Leslie.
Yes, Reverend Green. Why did you come in the back door? Why did you sneak in the back door?
Well, I've known Mrs. White for many years. I've been in the parish for 15 years. I often come in through the back door. It's the nearest way through from the rectorate to the house, to see.
Tony and Fiona. So on to Miss Scarlett.
When Santa came into the library at the end, and you had a gun in your hand, where did you get the bullets from?
My father kept bullets. We never threw them away.
And I think it's time for you 2 teams to make a deduction. Who did it, with what weapon, and in which room?
Well, I still think that it's Colonel Mustard, and I think that it's in the dining room, but we have changed. We now think that it was the candelabra.
In the dining room.
Trudy and Leslie?
Well, our deduction is that Forrest was not Forrest. The chauffeur was Forrest, because Forrest himself didn't know his way around and the chauffeur was more at home. That he was killed in the kitchen with a candelabra. That the Santa Claus was Colonel Mustard that came through, that met up with the Reverend Green and with Professor Plum. Colonel Mustard was dressed as Santa Claus when he met...
Colonel Mustard did the deed with what weapon?
With the candelabra.
Which room?
In the kitchen.
We haven't changed our minds.
I have to say that you're both wrong on all 3 counts, which in effect eliminates Colonel Mustard from further inquiries. But I wonder, how are you doing at home? Do you think our detectives are on the right road? Clearly they're not. Or are they actually missing the mark by a mile? We're trying to find out, remember, who killed Ken the chauffeur and why. And I can reveal that some fascinating new evidence has suddenly come to light, which may help our 2 teams, or perhaps may even hinder them. We start as Miss Scarlett is escorting Richard Forrest from the library on his guided tour of the Grange.
Oh!
Yes?
Well, I thought this was... but it isn't, is it?
It's Mr. Forrest. This is Mrs. White, our housekeeper.
Well, I never would have. Of course, it was a long while ago, wasn't it?
Mrs. White, how nice to see you again. Oh, excuse me.
I heard him telling Mrs. Peacock he's got diaries.
Diaries?
His father's diaries, telling everything. He wants this house, if he doesn't get it, we're all going to be exposed in the newspapers.
Some of the the other events that were happening in the house that evening. And remember, our earlier investigation has already ruled out Colonel Mustard. So in this round of questioning, each team is allowed 45 seconds at a time to ask as many questions of as many suspects as they can. But at the end of that 45 seconds, the opportunity to cross-examine then passes to the other team, and so on. And once again, to decide who goes first, a test for your powers of observation. Tony and Fiona, in the study there was a phone. What colour was it?
Black?
Black.
Trudy and Leslie?
White.
Correct. So you have the right either to go first or to pass that advantage to the other team.
Mrs. Peacock, when you brought the house from the judge, did Richard accompany him? Did you meet Richard as an adult?
No, I've never met Richard Forrest before.
That afternoon that he arrived?
That's right.
Clock is against you, Quick.
Mrs. White, you knew Richard when he was 11 or 12. Did you recognise him when he was sitting in your kitchen posing as the chauffeur?
Well, I was terribly confused that evening. I was very thrown when I was given that candlestick, and I was
Mrs.
really...
White, sorry, before that, you
That's
saw...
it, I'm sorry. Trudy and Leslie, 45 seconds.
I want to know, was it you, Colonel Mustard, who was in the Father Christmas outfit at the end?
Well, of course it was. Should have thought that was obvious.
There you go. 45 seconds, remember.
What I want to know is, to Mrs. Peacock, why you assumed that it was Mr. Forrest at the door when he hadn't introduced himself. It could have been...
Well, I had received a phone call from him saying he was going to call.
Dressed as Santa Claus?
Well, that's why I was slightly puzzled for a moment, as you might have noticed, but I mean, I like to think I can deal with any situation.
You've never met him before, then? Recently?
No, but I was expecting him.
But have you met him before,
No.
since he was a child?
No.
You haven't?
5 seconds left. One more question, quickly. That's it, Tony and Fiona. 45 seconds.
Sorry for suspecting it was you in the first place, Colonel Mustard, but could you tell me now why were you dressed as Santa Claus?
Well, at that particular juncture, the day hadn't gone awfully well, as you'll have gathered. And I had seen a certain young man off the premises. And I was looking for the other young man, so I thought it best to don the Father Christmas outfit.
He just likes dressing up.
Yes.
Quick.
Oh, there's something about the Reverend Green that... What is it that why should something that happened so many years ago over just money missing? What was it that bothered you so much?
We were raising money. I was posted to a parish in Liverpool, and we were raising money for the church bells, and someone went missing, and two of the boys were accused. I'd be grown up by now.
Trudy and Leslie.
Miss Scarlett, I have a question for Miss Scarlett. Why did you shriek the abuse at Colonel Mustard? What was the reason for that?
Because he's had an affair with my stepmother.
How did you know that?
Because she told me.
When did she tell you?
When I went to ask her if she was really going to marry Professor Plum, she dropped that bombshell.
All right, well,
on me.
Professor Plum, why were you under the impression that Mrs. Peacock would have married you?
Well, we met about 3 years ago when I moved to the village, and we met on many social occasions. I thought there was an understanding between us, and I thought
Did
it
you
was
know
rather
that
a
she
good
was having an
marriage.
affair
That's
with
it.
Colonel
I'm
Mustard?
afraid your time is up on that round. It's time now. You've interrogated all 6 suspects in that particular schedule there. Time to make a deduction, please. Who did it, with what weapon, and in which room? And remember, Colonel Mustard's already been eliminated.
Yes.
Well, I now think it was... no, I think it was the Reverend Green. Yes, the Reverend Green with the rope in the kitchen.
Why?
Because he has known Mrs. White for many, many years, and in that last bit we saw, they were talking about we will be exposed. So he knows why the candelabra upset Mrs. White.
The kitchen has
And
actually
he's
already been
protecting
eliminated,
her,
by the
that's
way.
why.
The kitchen is out.
Oh, the kitchen's out.
Trudy and Leslie.
I live by the 10 Commandments.
It's Mrs.
Thou shalt not kill.
It's Mrs. White.
I know, but it's
Mrs.
terrible
White.
thing to say, isn't it?
With
Thou
the
shalt not
knife
No.
in the hall.
No.
Mrs. White with
Never.
Trudy and Leslie, you're right on 1. Tony and Fiona, I have to tell you that you're wrong on all 3, so the Reverend Green is eliminated. First, police are getting on with it. They're hot on the trail, but there's still some distance from who actually killed Ken the chauffeur, with what and where. But before we go on, I'd like to put that same evidence to our grand jury here in the studio, the 300 members, indeed, of our studio audience. Now, you've seen the clues. What's your verdict? Please make your decision now. So there you have it. After 2 rounds of interrogation, 23% of our studio audience, that's 1 in 5, think that Miss Scarlett is the guilty culprit. There's no doubt in the minds of 54%, more than half of our grand jury here tonight, that the finger of suspicion points most decidedly at Mrs. White. But I wonder, do you at home agree? We'll take a short recess now and give you armchair detectives at home a chance to forage through the facts, evaluate the evidence and see if you can solve the mystery of who killed Ken the chauffeur. Welcome back. A crime has been committed at Arlington Grange. Ken the chauffeur is dead. But by whose hand, with what weapon, and in which room at the Grange? That's the task facing our studio sleuths. Must be getting, I'm sure, quite near the truth now. Must remember that the Reverend Green and Colonel Mustard have already been eliminated. But before we continue the questioning, further intriguing evidence of what actually happened that evening has come to light. We start as the Christmas quiz gets underway.
But why does it have to be a secret? If we love each other, why can't we just tell everybody?
We will.
Yes?
At the right time.
And when will that be?
Trust me, Vivian. Okay? Just trust me. They are gonna lynch me. No. They are! You said it was gonna be a laugh. It is. Well, not in there, it isn't. Listen, you are the judge's son, and that makes you untouchable. I don't feel particularly untouchable, do I? Then think of the money. Have you seen Mrs. Peacock?
Drawing room.
Oh, how are you doing with these things?
What am I supposed to do with this little lot?
Do what you like. You needn't worry about the knife, though. Mother took it.
So some more evidence there, but as our 2 teams of detectives are now very near to the truth, they're allowed just 1 question followed immediately by a deduction. And again, to decide who goes first, an observation question. Tony and Fiona, Ken's notebook, what colour was it?
Pink. Pinkish red.
Trudy and Leslie?
Orange.
It was pink, indeed. Tony and Fiona, 1 question and a deduction. Please.
Okay. Colonel Mustard.
Yeah.
When you went in to see Santa Claus, did you already know that that man wasn't Forrest?
No, I didn't at that point.
A deduction.
I think it was Mrs. Peacock with a knife in the study. Mrs. Peacock, because he was covering for her because he was in love with her and not with Miss Scarlett.
Tony and Fiona, you're right on 1 of those assumptions.
Oh,
one of those
only
assumptions.
Only one.
Trudy and Leslie?
We believe it's Miss Scarlett with the knife in the drawing room. No, sorry, in the study.
Why Miss
In the
Scarlett?
study. Why? Because by using the knife, it blames her stepmother, and by putting the blame onto her stepmother and getting rid of her stepmother, eliminating the chauffeur who was Forrest, therefore there's no threat to Colonel Mustard, there's no threat to...
Trudy and Leslie, I have to say you're right on 2 of those assumptions. So, the advantage passes back to Tony and Fiona. Surely you can see it now, can't you?
Yes. I was thrown by Mrs. Peacock, and although he was in love with her, yes, it is Miss Scarlett, but of course it wasn't in the study. It was in the library.
Which weapon?
What? With the knife, because she lied to Mrs. White about the knife when she said Mother's taken the knife, thereby putting the blame onto her mother and her stepmother about the knife. She already had the knife.
Miss Scarlett did it. Who said that?
Miss Scarlett
With the knife
with the
in
knife
the library.
You are right on all 3 assumptions.
Yes, it was me. With the knife in the library. At first I was going to kill Mike, Colonel Mustard. Well, wouldn't you if you'd been betrayed by someone you loved, who all the time was planning to marry your stepmother. Anyhow, that's why I went to the study, to try and find some bullets that would fit the gun I'd been given. And then he came in that Father Christmas outfit and told me how the chauffeur was really Richard Forrest and how he was trying to blackmail my mother into giving him the house. Then I realized how, if I killed Forrest with my mother's knife, I could throw all the blame onto her and keep the house and my lover. So I went to look for Forrest, who was still in the library trying to finish off that ridiculous quiz. It's a pity he didn't live long enough to learn that he had the correct answers.
So, there you have it. Vivian Scarlett, scheming to the last, stabs to death the real Richard Forrest in the library. My apologies, of course, to the 5 other murder suspects this evening. You are obviously totally exonerated from blame. Our thanks to you for helping us in our inquiries. My commiserations to Trudy and Leslie for their unsuccessful work tonight.
We were very close, though.
We were close. We gave it to them.
And, of course, our congratulations to Tony and Fiona for some excellent detective work.
Oh, we were helped.
We were helped, yes.
And I hope you at home enjoyed playing Armchair Detectives with us tonight. From all of us here on Cluedo, enjoy the rest of your Christmas holiday. Good night.
A new series of Cluedo begins next spring.